All right, so we have had quite an adventure over the last several weeks here on the History Things podcast. Miss Sarah Morgan joined us back in October to talk about her channel, Cooking with the First Ladies, her journey through time with the women that actually ran this nation, through the things they cooked for themselves, their husbands, famous people, politicians, statesmen all across the world, things like that. And obviously, Sarah, we thank you for joining us for that and for taking some time to talk about Edith Wilson, who at the end of that episode, you brought forth some Edith Wilson recipes. And we said we were going to do something absolutely ridiculous, insane for two guys who pretty much know how to talk, and that's about it. So, Sarah, you led us through actually cooking a few of Edith Wilson's recipes. I believe we cooked the Georgia Kiss pudding, we cooked the tea cakes, and we made vegetable chocolate bars, man.
Yes, we did.
Before we get into our weird experience by being in a kitchen that we're not, it's an alien environment for Matt and I. Which of those three was your favorite going in? And then after having made them, do you still have that favorite?
So I would definitely have to go with the Georgia Kiss pudding, especially when you make it right and correct. Her tea cakes are pretty bland. They're pretty plain. And of course the vegetable chocolate bar is just a weird experience. And I can't believe that back, in the early 1900s that was a type of candy bar that they were.
Thing.
Yeah, who would know? So definitely the pudding out of those particular recipes.
We found the pudding was also our personal favorites. What we found interesting was we made so much dough accidentally for the tea cakes that we were able to make a ton of them.
Right.
So I took them into work and gave them out to about 20, 25 different people and volunteers that come around my site. And the tea cakes were a hit. I took in the chocolate bars. They were like, okay. Some of the pudding was like, okay, because we'll talk about the pudding in a minute. That was the craziest part of the adventure. But the tea cakes were a hit. And then a few people actually asked me if I should try them with things. And I remembered that the sheet you sent us said try them with some ice cream. So I told actually my boss, I was like, try it with a little bit of ice cream. And he was like, dude, this is legit delicious. So big hits for our friends and I guess family on the tea cakes. But Matt and I, we liked the pudding. The pudding was good.
Absolutely.
On the note of the chocolate bar, Sarah, Matt and I weren't able to find too much more else, but it seems like we kept coming back to this was a good way to get soldiers to eat their vegetables and maybe be a little more regular, if you know what I mean, in the trenches and things like that. And I was humored by the simplicity of that. As a kid, my parents would coat things in syrup like carrots, put a bit of maple syrup on it to get me to eat it. And I was like, man, they should have just, Matt, what's that face? You've never had syrup on your...
No,
not
on carrots.
Have you done that, Sarah? Or is that just me?
I didn't know. It sounds good, but no.
All right. I hope there are dozens at the very least of our listeners out there who are like, I'm with you, Pat.
I thought you were going to say like cheese or something, which I totally get that.
I put cheese on things, but no, my parents used to put maple syrup on carrots when I was being an obnoxious kid about it. So
it's weird, man.
I ate them.
I'll tell you something weird. I put ketchup on my green beans when I was a kid.
Whoa.
Do you do that now? Do you
still No, I do not do that now.
All right, well, at least you still eat
that is unique.
Syrup and ketchup, definitely sweet additions to vegetables we don't want to eat. And we figured I should time travel back, add it to the list of things we got to do when we time travel. But I got to see my mom and dad and say, hey, put chocolate on things and I will eat them. So that was pretty neat. But let's talk about the pudding. Because when we actually did the live cooking for this, as you'll be watching it, we're going to intentionally show you that we hit a wall first. Because when we cooked this pudding, we did all the ingredients, we got it all together, and then I don't know where it happened. It was probably an error on our end because Matt and I, for as much reading as we do, we can't actually read. So we probably cooked it too short, and we basically took it out, and it was like this watery, and we were like, oh. You came back to us and said, boys, you got to cook it longer. So we did that, and it was delicious. What was it like for you when you realized that we were off the rails on our end? Were you just like, God, these guys are amateurs?
No, well, because mine didn't really turn out either.
All right.
When they all cooked together. So no, I don't really know what went wrong. Besides that, we did not cook it long enough. Initially, let it thicken up, and I don't know if the cornstarch was fully dissolved, because I went back and looked at the recipe. And then also, one of the things I kind of realized is that I compared that recipe to a recipe in the suffragette cookbook. Because when I presented at History Camp Boston, it was the suffragettes. And so I was reading through these cookbooks and just stumbled across it, but it was just called kiss pudding. So I'm not really sure. I can't really figure out why it's Georgia kiss pudding versus just kiss pudding. But yeah, so I read that recipe and I was like, oh, like cannot be lumpy cornstarch to go in, it won't thicken up. So
yeah, we added a ton of cornstarch. We followed you when you said you might need to add more. We were like, okay, and then we added and we added. We were like, well, she wasn't kidding. Keep adding the cornstarch. So
yeah,
definitely the time we cooked it and the amount of cornstarch were the key to our success. So when you watch all of this, obviously this will have been trimmed down to a nice and neat presentation for you all, but Matt and I were like, what is happening? And it took several days to figure it out, a couple of weeks to get the production in line again. Obviously, Sarah, you have a family, Matt and I with our families here, things just went bonkers. So the production timeline just to get the pudding right. But it was a success, and we thank you. We thank you so much for joining us for that. As we wrap all this up, we got a lot coming up on our end, but our listeners are going to get a whole special episode as they do every year towards the end of the year to hear about what's on our schedule. But we want to talk a little bit about maybe what's on your schedule or some things that you've done since we first spoke. And I personally want to talk about your cookie battle. Your
Indeed.
Is that what it's really called, or are we shorthanding it to your cookie battle?
Well, kind of, because it's actually the cookie championship.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's what it is. I'm gonna definitely probably do it again next year. Try to do it a little bit bigger and better. But I essentially cooked, or I did. So I figured out the math. So I made 16 doughs, 6 for 16 First Ladies, March Madness style cookie bracket, the whole thing. So that's a lot of dough. Number one, I didn't like triple or double the recipe, but ultimately my husband and I figured up that just when I cooked the small amounts, I'd cook about 20 cookies every single time that we broke them down. That I made about 640 cookies. And then when you factor in that I didn't then just waste the dough, so the loser cookies, then I would bake the rest of the dough and pass them out to neighbors, friends, take them for my kids at my synagogue and stuff. So they didn't go to waste. So I probably cooked over 1,000 cookies.
So Matt and I need to move is what we're hearing from you.
That's definitely what I'm hearing.
Can't live on your street so that when you're giving out free cookies, Matt and I are gracious acceptors of them. I loved when I first saw this pop up in my timeline, because obviously we're not just, talking to you as you're a guest on our show. We're fans of yours. So we follow along with your work, and you appear in our timeline, in our Instagram stories. And every time we see these, we're like, yes, let's interact. I don't know that Matt and I have directly communicated about this, but I can always tell when Matt has voted or I have voted, because it's already like you can see the circle of what's been viewed in the timeline. And sometimes I'm like, Matt got to this before me. So I have lost track of which First Lady is associated with which cookie, because when I see the cookie to cookie battle, I focus on, do I like chocolate chip? Do I like sugar cookies? Which did those ever, I might have missed a few. Did those ever go head to head? Because those are my two favorites.
The sugar cookie versus the chocolate chip.
Did that happen directly head to head? Good, because I couldn't vote on it if it did.
I don't think it did. There's been so many cookie. I don't think that they did, because initially I did try to pair the cookies up with similar cookies. And then of course, as it all, down to like the, final four and stuff, it was 4 very different cookies. But ultimately, I'm surprised Eleanor Roosevelt, because right now it's the final 2. It's Betty Ford's double chocolate chip Thanksgiving cookies and Laura Bush's cowboy cookies.
So by the time this is out, you're going to have to, if you didn't already do this in real time with Sarah, you're going to have to go back and follow Cooking with the First Ladies. And if you're not, shame on you. After all this time, we've been telling you to do it, but you got to go back and find out who won, because obviously this is taking place before the drop of this episode. So I'm going to vote. Wait a minute. I can't, because I'd have to do this in real time when I'm actually thinking about it. Mike, but it did pop the question into my head. Did you find people were voting for the quality of the cookie or their fandom of the First Lady?
Yeah. So when this is all said and done, I am going to ask that question on Instagram. I want to know if anybody did make any of the cookies, or if they were voting for the cookie that they liked. Like you kind of said you would do with the cookies, or if they were just looking at it and they go, you know what, Betty Ford's my favorite first lady out of these two, so I'm going to go with that. But with the kind of blind tests that I was doing in person with the cookies, I did find people were surprised because they weren't voting. They had no idea who the first lady was. They only knew, you know, it's this cookie versus this cookie. Okay, I like that chocolate chip better.
Were people upset when they chose things against their political beliefs? Like, I picked a cookie that's this color and I'm not this color politically.
Some people, and I wouldn't really say upset or mad because of the kind of
environment
I was in, you know, but there were like shocks of like, you know, I would not have picked Hillary Clinton's chocolate chip cookies or wouldn't have picked, you know, this other cookie. But, you know, they were picking what they liked that tasted the best. So based on the recipe. So it was interesting to see kind of the similarities between people that knew who the first lady was versus the blind test that I was doing. They were actually pretty close, pretty similar. But out of all of these cookies, and I know she's not in the final two, but everybody loved Eleanor Roosevelt's soft and chewy ginger snap cookies, which I
want to make those. Nice. We like ginger snaps, and a lot of the people in our environment here locally like them. So those are the ones that we were thinking about making at some point. But Matt and I have agreed after the production of this episode that you're the professional and we are not, and we are going to stay out of the kitchens for a while. I mean, I do dinner and stuff just for all of you out there who are listening to me right there. Like Matt and I cook dinner and stuff, but like the adventurous cool stuff, no, I'm not doing any of that. I make like tacos and pasta and the basics for the kids and stuff, but no, we're leaving the cool stuff to you, Sarah, the professional. So, looking ahead, do you have anything that you want to share or you want to keep it tight? Because obviously we're recording this before the direct end of the year. Matt and I keep some things top secret, or do you want to share what's coming up for Cooking with the First Ladies and Sarah Morgan?
Yeah, sure. I will be doing the quarterly live programs again for the National First Ladies Library, which is all virtual, of course, and free. But I haven't picked my 4 first ladies. I have a really good idea of the 4 that I'm going to do. And my next actual live program won't be until March because we're kind of changing my quarterly schedule. So it'll be a minute for those. But hopefully
give you plenty of lead time for it.
Yes, I know. I do. I have a really good amount of time. So, and then beyond that, just trying to kind of put together kind of monthly things to do, and you know, kind of doing the happy birthday to different first ladies and sharing some of their recipes, and trying to kind of get back into some of the stuff that I was doing when I first kind of started the project before National First Ladies Library or history camps or any of that stuff. So just kind of some of that more simple stuff. And I'm planning on also doing a project involving kind of what you would consider top secret, and I won't get too much into it. But it's kind of going to branch off from the First Ladies, and I'm going to kind of focus a little bit on studying about the ladies of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and the Manhattan Project.
Oh, that's cool. Incredible, Sarah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Very much look forward to that. So, all right. So, final toss to you then to follow along with all these updates that are going to be coming, for all these cool things that are going to appear on your schedule, programs like that, history camps, and your quarterly programs. How do our listeners find you on social media?
Just at Cooking with the First Ladies on Instagram, just at Cooking with First Ladies. My husband's set this website up for me. So it's cookingwiththefirst.ladies.com. And he really keeps up with all of that. I don't do anything like that, but I do have a website now, and he tries to put new stuff coming up. And like, for instance, it has all the cookie recipe cards that I made and that sort of thing. Cool. And I also have a Facebook page now as well. I don't really do anything with that though, which you can find all of that on my website.
All right. Well, Instagram sounds like you got a .com now and a Facebook. But if you want the quick and the up-to-date stuff, go to Instagram following at Cooking with the First Lady. Sarah, thank you so very much for spending several weeks with us talking about Edith Wilson, making cookies and pudding and all this fun stuff. It was an absolute
walking us through it.
Yes, it was an absolute treat for us. Stressful at times for Matt and I because we are weirdly out of our element in this moment, but that's what we wanted to do. So if you're out there watching this whole production and you were like, those two guys look lost, that was inadvertently the goal. We wanted to do something fun and genuine and outside the box, and we wanted a pro to lead us through it. So Sarah, thank you for being the pro that took us to the end of our year here. We are very grateful. So for our listeners out there asking about what's up next on ours, we'll share the big story on our year-end review, but that is the episode that immediately comes next. So if you were waiting for the next History Things podcast episode, just about 2.5 weeks from the time this one comes out, it's going to be the way we look back. The one where we look back on season 4, look ahead to a very monumental season 5 for the History Things podcast. Big guests this year. Thank you, Sarah, for being a fan and return of ours. We were very excited. So we got a lot to talk about in that. So closing it out here for our guest today, Sarah Morgan, host of Cooking with the First Ladies. For my co-host, Matt Borders, I am Pat McGuire. And this has been the History Things podcast saying we'll catch you all later.
Have a good night.